That evening, I had a strange feeling, as if I had arrived in my own room too early or too late. There was no fatigue, no tension, only an internal pause that refused to end. I moved slowly, cautiously, as if afraid to disturb something, not with my hands, but by the mere fact of my presence. The room looked familiar. The desk stood where it always did. The chair didn't wobble. The bed was made, but a sense of depth had appeared between the objects. Not distance, a void that could be felt by the body. While I took a step, it seemed the floor didn't accept me immediately, as if it were considering whether it was worth it. I adjusted the lamp several times. The light fell correctly, but it didn't touch everything. A shadow remained in the corners, denser than usual, as if someone had been standing there before and forgotten to leave. Before sleep, I heard footsteps from below. They were slow and heavy, but worst of all, they were delayed. First a movement, then a dull echo, as if the house first accepted the weight and only then realized it was excessive. I lay on my back, staring at the ceiling. I listened to the house breathe, the pipes, the creaks, the settling. The breathing was deep, too deep, as if it were drawing in air for someone else. Somewhere nearby, a floorboard snapped dryly. Before falling asleep, I felt a slight vibration. Not a sound, not a movement, but a presence, as if someone had stepped very carefully into my room and frozen, checking to see if I was already unable to do anything. I thought it was a dream. Consciousness returned before the body did. I hadn't opened my eyes yet, but I already knew I was lying there. I felt the bed, the blanket, the cold air on my face, and simultaneously understood that my body was no longer mine. My eyes opened on their own. I tried to move. Nothing. I tried to tense my muscles. Nothing. Not even the sensation of tension. It was as if the wire between thought and body had vanished. I tried to take a deeper breath. The breath cut off. My chest was heavy, as if a stone lay inside. My heart beat, but dully, not on my chest, but somewhere below, beneath the floor. Time ceased to exist normally. I couldn't count the seconds. I didn't know how long I had been lying there. Perhaps forever. The street light touched only the floor. The ceiling had vanished. The room had grown deeper than before, as if an extra space had appeared between me and the walls, a space in which one could get lost. I felt the floor sagging under someone. Not under me, somewhere nearby. At first, it was like internal pressure, like a pulse in the ears. Then, like a toothache. And then I realized it was external. My gaze found the center of the room on its own. A little girl stood in the middle of it. I hadn't seen the moment of her appearance. She didn't arrive. She manifested, as if she had been standing there all along, and only now had I become still enough to notice her. She was miniature, thin, almost transparent, as if assembled from shadow and pale light. Her legs were thin as matchsticks. Her arms hung limply. To the eye, she looked too light to be dangerous. But the floor was sagging beneath her. Slowly, inevitably, the wooden boards trembled and groaned, as if they couldn't decide whether to break or not. Around her feet, a depression formed, deepening second by second. The girl took a step. The floor moaned as if the house felt pain. This sound passed through me. I felt it in my stomach, my chest, my throat. It felt as if I were lying not on a bed, but within the structure itself, and any movement would break it. She came closer. She moved slowly, carefully, as if she knew well that she had no right to hurry. Her face was ordinary. No malice, no compassion, no intent. She looked at me and whispered, almost shyly, "It is hard for me to stand." Another step. The floor near the bed sank. The mattress shuddered, though she hadn't touched it yet. "I'm not big," she said quietly, "but within me there is so much." Her words carried weight, not in their meaning, but in their gravity. She stopped by the bed. The boards creaked, but did not snap, as if something were intentionally holding them on the brink. I do not sit because then I would fall through. Her head tilted slowly. Can you bear it just a little? I try to scream. I try to tense my lips, my tongue, my fingers. But my body was not just motionless. It no longer belonged to me. She placed a foot on the edge of the bed. The mattress sagged sharply. The air became dense and heavy, as if I were underwater. I couldn't breathe. The girl slowly climbed onto the bed without touching me. I won't be here long, she whispered. The floor always seems strong until I come. She sat down beside me. I didn't feel a touch, but the bed sank as if a concrete slab had been lowered next to me. The air vanished from my lungs. Darkness swirled before my eyes. Don't be afraid, she said. I will just rest. And in that same instant, the paralysis vanished. I sat up abruptly, gasping for air. The room was empty. The floor, level. No cracks. No dents. But in the morning when I got out of bed, I noticed that the boards near the edge were slightly lower than in the rest of the room, as if someone very light and yet unbearably heavy had been sitting there for far too long. And I knew for certain, if she returns, this time the floor might not hold. That evening, I couldn't fall asleep for a long time because of sound. It wasn't loud, more persistent, the kind that prevents the body from fully relaxing. The house is old. Something is always responding here. Pipes, the elevator, the stairs. But this time the sound had a rhythm. Clink, a dull, thud, pause. As if somewhere far away, something heavy was being slowly dragged across the floor. I lay there, counting the thuds, trying to understand where they were coming from. From below? From a hallway? Or perhaps already from inside my head? With each repetition, the sound became a little closer, not louder, but denser, as if it were occupying more space in the air. I tossed and turned, trying not to listen, but the pauses between the thuds only heightened the tension. Eventually, exhaustion took its toll. The sound seemed to recede, dissolving into the darkness, and I fell asleep. The awakening was wrong. I didn't open my eyes. I was stuck between sleep and my body. Consciousness had already returned, but my body had not. The first thing I felt was the weight. Not on my chest, not on my arms, in the very air itself. The room had become dense, as if filled with something heavy and invisible. Every attempt to inhale met resistance, as if I were breathing through wet fabric. I tried to move, not even with my limbs, just with a thought. But between the desire and the body, there was a void. Then I realized paralysis. Time broke. I couldn't tell how long this moment was lasting. Seconds stretched, but didn't add up to minutes. I lay there and felt my body slowly growing heavier, as if something inside was sinking downward. And then once again the sound. Clink, scraping thud. It was coming from the hallway. I opened my eyes. In the doorway stood a man. Thin, haggard, with slumped shoulders. He wore dark clothes that looked like a prison uniform. Chains bound his wrists and ankles. Attached to them were weights, old black, worn by time. They lay on the floor, but they didn't just lie there. They pressed. Even at a distance, I could feel their weight. The prisoner took a step. The floor struck with a dull thud. The sound passed through me, as if I were part of the floor structure itself. "You hear it," he said in a raspy voice. "That is good. Not everyone hears." He moved very slowly. Every step came at the cost of great effort, yet he did not fall. The weights pulled him down, but something prevented him from collapsing. "They hold me. Not here." He nodded somewhere downward, beneath the floor. "They always think that if they tie me down, I won't come." He approached closer. The metal clinked dully, without an echo, as if the room were swallowing the sound, leaving only the weight behind. I tried to scream. My lips wouldn't obey. My chest wouldn't fully rise. "You sleep peacefully," he said, looking at me. And I count. He raised his hand. The chain tensed. The weight shifted, leaving a deep furrow on the floor. Every night, every mistake, every step, with every word, I felt the pressure in my chest intensify, as if the weights were no longer only on him. He stopped beside the bed. One of the weights touched the bedpost. The bed shuddered. The mattress beneath me slowly sagged, as if accepting extra weight. "I am not escaping," he whispered. "They let me go when someone carries a part." He leaned over. His face was very close, gaunt, with dark, sunken eyes. "Today it is your turn." One of the weights slowly rose. Not from the floor, from the air. It hovered over my chest. I felt the pressure, as if something massive yet invisible had been placed upon me. My breath cut off. The light blurred. "Don't be afraid," he said almost gently. "One gets used to it quickly." At that moment, the paralysis vanished. I inhaled sharply and sat up, gasping for air. The room was empty. No chains, no weights. But in the morning, I noticed deep indentations under the bed, as if something incredibly heavy had been lying there for a long time. And when I stood up, my steps felt different, duller, heavier, as if I, now, am carrying a little more than I was yesterday. That evening, I caught myself several times with a strange sensation, as if I were confusing someone. I would walk into a room and, for a second, be certain that someone was standing there. A blink, and no one. Not a shadow, not a movement, just a certainty that hadn't had time to take a concrete shape. I looked into the mirror and, for a brief moment, didn't recognize the expression on my own face. The features were mine, but the gaze, it was as if it were lagging, detached, like that of a person who had just woken up in a stranger's body. Even my voice on the phone sounded like a stranger's when I left a voice memo for myself. The intonation was correct, the words were mine, but the pauses between them weren't quite where they were supposed to be. Overworked, I decided. Before bed, I turned off the light and lay down, thinking of nothing in particular. My eyes grew heavy quickly, too quickly, as if my body were in a hurry to shut down before my mind did. Before finally drifting off into sleep, a thought flashed through my consciousness. Not a clear one, but rather a feeling. What if something is simply pretending to be familiar? Sleep came instantly. I woke up, but my body did not. Consciousness returned in fragments. First, the understanding that I was lying down. Second, the sensation of the bed beneath my back. And only after that, the panic of realizing I couldn't move. My eyes opened on their own, slowly, heavily, as if the eyelids were coated in something thick. The room was familiar. Too familiar. Everything looked correct. The arrangement of the furniture, the shadows, the light from the street. But this correctness felt oppressive, as if the room weren't mine, but a well-replicated copy made from memories. I tried to take a deeper breath. My chest rose only halfway. The air seemed to stop somewhere inside, never reaching my lungs. I tried to wiggle my fingers. Nothing. There wasn't even the sensation of tension. As if the connection between thought and body had vanished. As if someone had unplugged the controls, leaving only observation. Time stretched. I didn't know how long I'd been lying there. Seconds didn't add up to minutes. There was a feeling that I was stuck between states, and there was no way back. And then I noticed him. By the door stood a man. Ordinary. In loungewear. Almost like myself. I hadn't heard him enter. He was just there, as if he had been standing there from the very beginning, and only now had I gained access to this part of the room. He looked at me calmly, without curiosity, without aggression. "Don't be afraid," he said. "I'm just going to watch." His voice was almost right, too steady, without micro cracks, without the randomness of life. He took a step, and I saw his shadow on the wall lag, by a fraction of a second, but it was enough for something inside me to snap. The man blinked, and became someone else. An old woman stood before me, with familiar features I couldn't quite place. Her face was as if assembled from fragments of memory that refused to click into place. She leaned closer. "No, you don't react to this," she said thoughtfully. Her face began to run like wax under heat. The features slid and merged, and a moment later, a child stood before me. Small, with an overly serious, adult gaze. "This isn't what you're afraid of," she whispered. I felt my body growing heavier and heavier, as if I were being pressed into the mattress. My breathing was fragmented. My heart beat dully, as if not in my chest, but somewhere behind me. The figure changed again and again. A neighbor, a colleague, someone I once loved. The images shifted smoothly, without sharp transitions, as if he were sorting through possibilities, observing which would trigger the greatest internal shift. "Everyone has a form," he said, now without a specific face. The voice sounded from everywhere and from inside my head at the same time. "I'm simply looking for yours." He came closer. Now his body was blurred, multi-layered, several faces peering through one another, overlapping like frames of damaged film. "These aren't masks. These are memories." He leaned over me. I felt a coldness, not on my skin, but inside, as if someone had touched the very sensation of I. His features stilled. He became me, precise, down to the smallest detail. My gaze, my mannerisms, my exact expression in those moments when I don't recognize myself. "There it is," he said with my voice. "This form holds the longest." I felt something slide across my chest. Not a hand, not a body, but an intent to occupy the space. "When you wake up," he whispered, "don't be so certain." And in that instant, the paralysis vanished. I sat up abruptly, gasping for air. The air returned in a rush, painfully. The room was empty. The silence, ordinary. The mirror, ordinary. But when I went to the bathroom and looked at my reflection, it seemed to me that it blinked. For a second. Later than I did. And for a long time afterward, I couldn't shake the feeling that the demon hadn't disappeared. He had simply found a form that suited him. That evening, I had a dull, aching toothache. Not severe, more persistent and blunt, as if something from inside my jaw was reminding me of its presence every now and then. I rinsed my mouth a few times, took a painkiller, and decided I would make a dentist appointment in the morning. Before bed, I reflexively ran my tongue over my teeth. All there, familiar, slightly rough from the toothpaste. For some reason, I remember my childhood and that silly story about the tooth fairy. How we put a tooth under the pillow. How we waited for small change. I even smiled at the thought, more with irony than nostalgia. I lay down, wrapped myself in the blanket. The pain was slowly receding, dissolving somewhere deep into the jaw. My eyes grew heavy. Before finally falling asleep, I thought I heard a barely perceptible tinkling, as if small metal objects were carefully touching each other, trying not to make a sound. I decided it was a dream. I woke up in paralysis. Consciousness returned instantly, sharply, as if I had been jerked back into my body. But the body did not respond. The first thing I felt was my open mouth. My jaw was pried open too wide, unnaturally, in a way I could never do myself. I tried to close it. Nothing. I tried to press my lips together, in vain. My tongue lay like a heavy, alien lump in my mouth. I couldn't pull it back. I couldn't swallow. My breath came through my throat, dry and fragmented, as if the air were scratching from the inside. I tried to take a deeper breath. My chest rose only halfway, as if someone were limiting the volume, as if I no longer had the right to a full breath. I realized I couldn't move at all. Arms, legs, neck, everything was heavy, cast in place, motionless. Even the thought of movement caused a strange resistance, as if the very idea of motion were out of place here. Time began to break. I didn't know how long I'd been lying like this. Seconds stretched, but didn't add up to minutes. Panic came in waves and immediately went dull, for the body had nowhere to release it. And then I felt the pressure beside the bed. Not a movement, Not a sound. A presence. I shifted my gaze upward. Above me, sitting on the edge of the bed, was she. Small. Thin. Too neat for what she was meant to do. The wings behind her back were not made of feathers. They were translucent, thin as an insect's membrane. They trembled slightly, and it was from them that the same tinkling I had heard before sleep originated. In her hands, she held tools. Small, shiny, real, not toys. She leaned closer. I felt the cold from her presence, even before the touch. Her face was almost sweet, if not for the eyes. The eyes were empty, attentive, businesslike, without emotion, without pity. "You are an adult now," she whispered. The voice was quiet but too close, as if echoing inside my head. "Yet the teeth, you still keep them." She touched my cheek with cold fingers. In that same instant, I felt something fix my head in place. Not with hands, not with straps. The very possibility of moving my neck simply vanished, as if it had been nailed to space itself. "They only left me the baby ones," she said softly. "But the adult ones? No one gives them up." She peered into my mouth. I felt metal touch my gums. The cold passed deep into the jaw, all the way to the roots. I wanted to scream. I wanted to clench my teeth. I wanted to at least bite down on the metal. But my mouth was open like a tool. "Don't worry," the fairy whispered. "I will take all of them." The first tooth came out without pain, without sound, as if it had simply been twisted out of reality, leaving a void. The second, the third, I felt not pain, but loss. How the gums are left without support. How something important vanishes without a trace. The fairy worked quickly, with focus, placing the teeth into a small pouch on her belt. I heard the quiet chime, metal against enamel. "You have no idea," she whispered. "How many of you hide them?" She leaned even closer. I felt her breath on my lips. "A smile is a lie." The metal touched the molars. Now, breathing became difficult. My mouth was full of emptiness. "This is how it's meant to be," she said with satisfaction. "Now, nothing holds you." She raised her head and looked me straight in the eyes. "And it doesn't hurt, does it?" And in that instant, the paralysis vanished. I sat up abruptly, gasping for air, clutching my mouth with my hands. My heart was pounding. The room was empty. No fairy. No tools. I rushed into the bathroom and looked in the mirror. My teeth were in place. All of them. But when I ran my tongue along my gums, I felt barely perceptible gaps, as if they had become sparser. And beneath the pillow, where I had placed nothing, lay a single small coin, damp and warm.